Hello everyone. So in this presentation we are going to look at teaching reading skills in secondary classes. So we are dealing with teenagers now, and in previous presentations we have discussed some characteristics of teenagers. I'm not going to repeat them, but I'd really like to reiterate the fact that teenagers are at the peak of their self-conscious, so it's very difficult to teach them any skill and push them and motivate them to learn and develop their skills. Of course, we at this stage we are focusing more on comprehension rather than developing letter sound correspondences or oral competence. But of course, for those students who haven't developed letter sound correspondences and their vocabulary or oral competence is so inadequate that they cannot start the reading process, teachers will have to give them some extra work and spend time with them in developing their letter sound correspondences, vocabulary, oral competence, so that they can start their reading process and they perform well. Okay, so in this presentation, we are going to look at a lot of different things ranging from how comprehension works to what fluent readers do, lesson objectives to lesson structure, and what we can do at each stage of a reading lesson so that we can facilitate reading comprehension. So a lot of things are coming up. I'd like you to fasten your belts and let's get started. A good way to start off this presentation is to see the definition. Very simple definition of reading is a process of constructing meaning from the written text. So a lot of focus is on comprehension, as I've said earlier. Now let's see, how does the comprehension work? Different experts have sought to explain what happens when a reader tries to comprehend the text. One of these explanations is bottom-up processing, where a reader makes meaning from words, phrases, and sentences. So it's sort of bottom-up processing. We go down into the bottom processes of the text, that is words, phrases, and sentences. We read them, try to integrate them and make meaning out of them. So word recognition is one of the important skills in bottom-up processing. We figure out grammatical patterns to understand what the text explains. On the other side of the pendulum, it's top-down processing, where we holistically understand the text. So background knowledge, prediction, connecting new knowledge with existing one, they play an important role. So here we do not go into the bottom processes of the text. Rather, we bring a lot of knowledge to the text and we try to confirm or reject our predictions and understanding whatever we have by reading selective information from the text and seeing if we are right or wrong. The midway between the two is interactive processing, where we use both the approaches to understand the text. So we are applying our background knowledge to the text and we are predicting a lot of things before reading the text, but we are also making meaning from words, phrases, and sentences, and we are figuring out grammatical patterns in order to understand what's written in the text. Arguably, interactive processing is perhaps the best way to approach reading in the reading classroom. A good way to approach reading is to see what do fluent readers do in the process of reading. So researcher Priestley came up with a list in which it's explained that what do fluent readers do in the reading process. So we can perhaps emulate these skills and strategies and train our students in these strategies so that they can also become fluent readers. So fluent readers plan and form goals before reading, they predict before reading. So this is a mixture of top-down and bottom-up processes. They read selectively according to goals, they reread as appropriate, they monitor their reading continuously, they identify important information, they try to fill in gaps in their understanding through inferences and prior knowledge. They make guesses about unknown words to keep reading. They use text structure information to guide understanding. And we'll see in the future slides how we can improve students' understanding of the text structure through the use of graphic organizers. So coming back to the list, fluent readers attempt to integrate ideas from different parts of the text. They build interpretations of the text as they read. They build main idea summaries. They evaluate the text and the author and form feelings about the text. So a lot of emotional processes are also involved in the process of reading. So they also attempt to resolve difficulties. They reflect on the information in the text. So we can also engage our teenagers in these processes in the reading lessons so that they develop their habit to read like fluent readers, and eventually they'll become fluent readers themselves. Now let's take a brief look at different purposes of reading. We read to get general information, we read to get specific information, we read sometimes to learn from texts, we read to write something, as in writing, as in reading for searching information, for writing an essay or a story or something of that sort. We also read for pleasure. Let's take a look at typical reading procedure. So in a typical reading procedure, teacher chooses a text and asks learners to read it aloud or silently. Learners then answer comprehension questions, and then there is a class correction either in pairs, groups, or as a whole class. At this moment, I'd like you to pause and think about how this typical reading procedure is different from testing reading comprehension. So in a test, what is the procedure, and match it with this teaching typical reading procedure and see what's the difference. You mustn't have been able to find a lot of differences between teaching reading and testing reading, but it must be recognized that teaching reading is not equals to testing reading. Instead of focusing on testing students' comprehension, we should first and foremost teach them the skills and strategies they need to tackle different types of texts. So let's see how we can do this. Since reading is a skillful process, we need to teach a lot of different strategies to our students so that they can become skillful readers. These strategies are tools for becoming fluent readers. Let's take a moment to differentiate between skills and strategies. So skills are unconscious ability. They are the target where learners will reach. They are automatic use of strategies, whereas strategies are conscious ability. They are the journey through which they are going to reach to the level where they can become fluent readers. They are the tactics which are used while reading. So we can teach different strategies to our students and train them in using those strategies so that those strategies become part of their skill sets and therefore lead them to becoming fluent readers. Let's look at some of the common strategies: skimming, scanning, using background or prior knowledge, making predictions about the text, asking questions about the topic, inferring meaning from context, making connections, and using graphic organizers. You will see in the downloads that there is a file called graphic organizers in which you will find multiple graphic organizers. They can be used in reading lessons to help students organize their knowledge about the text. They are also very useful for teaching the knowledge about different text structures. Another important distinction as a teacher we need to make about the text, whether we see text as an object or text as a process. So there's a difference between the two. When we deal text as an object, we see that reader is just a recipient receiving information from the writer. There is no interaction between the reader and the text. So writer is sort of transmitting information to the reader and reader is just a recipient. Whereas in text as a process, we see reading as an active process where there's an interaction between the reader and the text, and writer and reader are interacting by reader asking a lot of questions, making predictions, using background knowledge to make connection with the text which is written. So a lot of interaction is going on, so the process becomes active and dynamic rather than passive and static. Now let's look at some of the basic principles for teaching reading. First of all, reading is purposeful. It is done purposefully, not that we are just reading. Teachers should choose appropriate text. Vocabulary knowledge facilitates comprehension. We should opt for activities that focus on skill integration. We should explicitly teach reading strategies. Text type knowledge is important. And finally, we should devise a well-structured lesson plan. So here we have two important elements: learning objectives and lesson structure. Let's explore these two in depth. First of all, learning objectives. We should be very clear from the outset that what our learning objectives for a reading lesson are. Is it for reading for gist, reading for specific information, reading for detailed comprehension, developing speed reading, training learners on specific reading strategies, inferring meaning from context, or the combination of all the above goals? So it is very, very important to be crystal clear in our objectives so that we can design our activities and engage learners in the reading process with a view of achieving these objectives. Now let's see what are the different stages of a reading lesson. First stage is pre-reading, so we need to have some activities before learners actually start the process of reading. Then second stage is when the students are reading, and the third stage is the post-reading, what learners are going to do after readings. There are separate aims for different stages, which we are going to look in the following slides. The first stage is pre-reading, and the aims for this stage are to prepare learners for the reading task by pre-teaching vocabulary and grammar. Remember that students need to know at least 90% of the vocabulary in a text in order to comprehend the text successfully. So if they don't know at least 90% of the vocabulary, so we are going to teach that before they actually start reading. Second aim is to help learners make predictions about the reading text. The third aim is to create the need to know more about the topic. And the last aim is to motivate learners to read by giving a purpose to read. Remember that we don't need to use all these aims in one lesson. We can use one or two aims in one lesson. Now let's look at some of the pre-reading activities which we can use. First is brainstorming. It could be oral or written discussion. We can use pictures to teach vocabulary. We can also play this game called Pictionary, in which the teacher draws a picture on the board and students predict the words associated with that picture. We can also ask students to make predictions about the text. We can use KWL chart, which is know, want to know, and learn chart. This is one of the graphic organizers and it is available in the downloads. You can see, and the explanation is also given how to use this chart. We can also use word cloud, where students write a topic in the middle and develop a word cloud by writing associated words. We can also use videos to motivate students and setting a purpose to read the text. The next stage is while reading. and this is the longest stage in the reading lesson, and this is the most important stage, where students not only read the text once but they read multiple times. The aims for this stage are to connect learners' prior knowledge with the content of the reading, to guide them towards a better understanding of the text, to help them gain new knowledge, and finally to train them to deal with similar texts in the future. Some of the while reading activities which we can use are skimming, in which we can give students some fill in the blanks and they skim a text to fill in the blanks. And we can also use scanning, and we can give some scanning questions like a closed passage in which after every 4 words there is a word missing, and students need to scan for that particular word in the reading text and fill in that word in that passage. We can also give them some comprehension questions which they need to answer by reading a text. We can use graphic organizers. We can ask them to highlight main ideas or write main ideas maybe in 50 words, 40 words. We can set any word limit, it's up to us. We can also set vocabulary tasks so that they can improve their vocabulary, and this is how they are interacting with the text. Perhaps the first interaction with the text could be by setting a vocabulary task. Let's say we can ask them to underline the words related to the main topic, or underline those words which they don't understand. So this could be the first reading of the text, and later on we can ask them to reread the text and skim for the information or answer a set of questions. The last stage is post-reading stage, and it aims to enable learners to get deeper understanding of the text and to help to organize their thoughts and ideas. It also aims to help learners to summarize their learning, and many a times we also focused on the grammatical aspects or the language of the text. Since the post-reading stage is reflective and evaluative, and it aims to improve students' understanding of the text, so we can use the activities like what I learned. We can ask the students to write a page on what they've learned from the text. We can also use discussion on the main points. We can ask them to summarize the text. We can ask them to retell the story. We can also use this activity called think, pair, share, in which students think about a given aspect of the text and then they individually share it with their partners, and then they share it with a group, and finally the whole class. This is how this multiple sharing of ideas enable them to have better understanding of the text. We can also ask them to draw the concept which they have learned from the text. We can ask them to present the information from the text. We can ask them to test each other on the information by making some questions and asking them to each other. These are practical steps we can take for developing our reading lessons. We should assist students in developing large sight vocabulary. Sight vocabulary refers to automatic recognition of words when we see them. According to vocabulary experts, we learn a word when we come across it 5 to 7 times. So we can assist the students in developing their sight vocabulary by engaging them in reading a lot of texts. We should connect reading to students' background knowledge to facilitate their comprehension. We should structure lessons around pre-reading, while reading, and post-reading tasks. We should create opportunities for comprehension skills practice, and we should give them opportunities to experience success, because if they are not experiencing success, they won't be motivated to read more. We should build students' text structure awareness. We should develop the strategic reader by training them to employ different strategies while reading, so that those strategies can become the part of their skill set and they employ those strategies automatically. We should also build students' reading fluency, and this can only be achieved when we provide consistent, extensive reading opportunities. Extensive reading refers to reading a lot, and students choose their own choice and they read whatever they want, but they read, and this improves their reading comprehension. Now let's look at some of the common challenges which we can face when we are teaching reading skills to teenagers. Reading longer text is one of the challenges because IT seems to lead people to surf and skim. Now every teenager has a mobile phone in his hand, so it's very difficult to encourage them to read longer texts, and we need to find ways around it. It's very difficult to motivate reluctant readers because teenagers are at the peak of their self-conscious, so they don't want to make the fools out of themselves and look stupid before others. So it's very difficult to motivate reluctant readers. We need to find a purpose for reading because teenagers don't really want to read. They think that they can learn everything through videos and other means, so they don't find any purpose for reading. So we need to choose interesting and varied text so that they bring some motivation with them and teenagers are interested to read them. Another challenge is to deal with mixed proficiency age group, because you will see in your classes there will be a mixed proficiency group. Someone will be good reader, some students won't be able to read a paragraph and understand. So we need to find strategies to deal with mixed proficiency groups. Perhaps we can differentiate our learning and give different texts if possible to different learners, or we can give at least different tasks, easier tasks to those whose proficiency level is low, and difficult tasks or extended tasks to those whose proficiency level is higher. Vocabulary is another challenge. We need to develop vocabulary simultaneously teaching reading skills so that they can understand a lot of things. Remember, 90% of vocabulary should be familiar in order to comprehend a text. Working with a course book is another challenge with a lot of teachers in Pakistan, because we have to teach a particular book to every teenager, despite the fact that their proficiency levels are different. So the only way around is to differentiate the tasks. We can use the same story with all these students and perhaps explain a little bit of the story to the students whose reading proficiency is low, and we can give them easier questions to attempt. We can provide scaffolding to them, and this is how we can work with the same course book in with different proficiency level students. Jumping onto the conclusions, comprehension is the focus of reading instructions with secondary students. Teaching reading is not similar to testing reading. It's a strategic process, so we should train learners to use strategies while reading. Our learning objectives of reading lessons should be crystal clear. Reading lessons should include pre-reading, while reading, and post-reading activities. And finally, learners should have multiple and successful opportunities for reading. I hope I'm able to present a broader view of teaching reading to secondary school students, and now you have a holistic view of teaching reading to secondary school children. Now let's move on to exploring this topic further by doing a task. For the task, you have a reading to complete and you need to answer the questions in the task sheet. Bye for this presentation, and I'll see you in the last presentation, which is teaching writing.